The telegram clutched in Elizabeth Vernon's trembling hands promised salvation. But as the stagecoach rolled into Carlin, Nevada, in the autumn of 1875, her heart sank at the sight of the man waiting for her, red-faced, swaying slightly, and wearing a scowl that made her blood run cold. "That him?" the driver asked quietly as he helped her down from the coach. "Your intended," Elizabeth nodded, unable to speak as Alfred Wilkes stumbled forward. At 35, he was older than his photograph suggested, with a weathered face and eyes that held none of the kindness she'd hoped for in the letters they'd exchanged over the past 6 months. "About time you got here," he slurred, gripping her arm too tightly. "Paid good money to get you out here." She had traveled for weeks from Boston, following the death of her parents and the loss of their modest home to debts she couldn't pay. The advertisement in the newspaper had seemed like divine providence, a rancher in Nevada seeking a wife, promising a comfortable home, respect, and perhaps, in time, affection. "Mr. Wilkes," she said, trying to keep her voice steady, "it's a pleasure to finally meet you." He grunted, eyeing her up and down. "You'll do, come on then, got the preacher waiting." Elizabeth's stomach clenched. "Now, but we've only just met. Surely we could take some time to paid for you to come here as a wife, not a house guest," he cut in, his breath heavy with whiskey. "Coach is leaving tomorrow. You either marry me today or find your own way back east." The reality of her situation crashed down upon her. 23 years old, 3,000 miles from home, with nothing but the clothes in her trunk and a few dollars to her name. She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. "Let me help with your trunk, miss," came a deep voice from behind her. Elizabeth turned to find a tall man in a dust-covered duster and worn Stetson watching the exchange with concerned eyes. He couldn't have been more than 26, with sun-bronzed skin and a neatly trimmed beard that framed a square jaw. "Ethan Lawson," he introduced himself with a tip of his hat. "Ranch hand over at the Triple Creek." "Mind your business, cowboy," Wilkes spat. "This here's my bride-to-be." Ethan's eyes never left Elizabeth's, and in them she saw something she desperately needed: compassion. "Madam," he said quietly, "you don't have to go through with it." Wilkes lunged forward, jabbing a finger into Ethan's chest. "You best move along before I decide to teach you some manners." "It's quite all right," Elizabeth intervened, fearing violence. "Mr. Lawson was merely being courteous." Ethan stepped back, hands raised slightly, "just offering assistance with the lady's luggage." "I'll handle my woman's things," Wilkes growled, roughly grabbing Elizabeth's trunk. As Wilkes struggled with the trunk, Ethan leaned closer to Elizabeth. "If you need help, I'll be at me's boarding house tonight. Carlin's small but decent folk live here. You've got options." Before she could respond, Wilkes had returned and was pulling her down the dusty main street toward a small white church. "Thank you," she managed to whisper to Ethan, not knowing if he heard her. The ceremony was a blur: the preacher's concerned glances, Wilkes's impatient responses. The cold metal of a plain band slipped onto her finger. Within 20 minutes, Elizabeth Vernon became Mrs. Alfred Wilkes, and her heart felt like lead in her chest. Wilkes's property lay 3 miles outside of town, a ramshackle cabin with peeling paint and a sagging porch, surrounded by neglected fields. It was nothing like the prosperous ranch he had described in his letters. "Home sweet home," he announced, pushing open the door to reveal a cluttered, dirty interior that smelled of stale tobacco and unwashed dishes. "I could clean this up," Elizabeth offered, trying to find something positive. "Make it comfortable." "Damn right you will," he said, dropping her trunk unceremoniously in the middle of the room. "That's what I bought you for, that and warming my bed." She flinched at his words. "I thought, from your letters, you wanted a companion, a partner." Wilkes laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. I wanted someone to cook and clean and give me sons. Don't need a companion for that. Elizabeth stood rooted to the spot as he moved to a cabinet and pulled out a bottle of whiskey. I'll need to unpack my things, she said softly. Do what you want. I'm heading back to town. Got a card game waiting. He took a long swig from the bottle. Have this place cleaned up by the time I get back. After he left, Elizabeth sank to the floor and allowed herself to cry for the first time since leaving Boston. This was to be her life now, trapped with a cruel, drunken stranger in a desolate cabin far from everything familiar. She thought of Ethan Lawson's kind eyes and his words. You don't have to go through with it. But what choice did she truly have? As darkness fell, she heard the sound of a horse approaching and tensed, dreading Wilkes's return. But the knock at the door was gentle. Mrs. Wilkes. A woman's voice called. It's Sarah Miller from town. I've brought some supper. Elizabeth opened the door to find a matronly woman in her 40s holding a covered basket. I own the general store, Sarah explained, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Everyone in town knows Alfred Wilkes ordered himself a bride. Thought you might need a friendly face and a hot meal. That's very kind, Elizabeth said, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness. It's not kindness, it's decency, Sarah replied, setting the basket on the table. And speaking of decency, I should tell you that Alfred Wilkes isn't known for having much of it. Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears again. I've gathered that. Sarah took her hands. Listen to me, child. Marriage is sacred, but so is a person's safety and dignity. If you need help, you come to town. My store has a room in the back. He's my husband now, Elizabeth whispered, for better or worse. Some worse is too worse, Sarah said firmly. Just remember what I said. She glanced around the filthy cabin. I'd help you clean, but I need to get back. Ethan Lawson asked me to check on you, said you seemed afraid. Elizabeth's heart fluttered at the mention of the cowboy. You know him. Everyone knows everyone in Carlin. Ethan's one of the good ones, works hard, treats people right. Sarah headed for the door. Remember what I said. You're not alone here. After Sarah left, Elizabeth began the daunting task of cleaning the cabin. For hours she scrubbed, swept, and organized, trying to make the dismal place habitable. She was hanging fresh curtains from her own trunk when she heard Wilkes return well past midnight. He stumbled through the door, even more intoxicated than before. Well, he slurred, looking around. Looks better, you'll earn your keep after all. Elizabeth kept her distance. I've prepared the bedroom for you, Mr. Wilkes. I can make a bed for myself out here for tonight. His face darkened. That's not how this works, wife. I paid for a whole woman, not half of one. Please, she said, backing away. We've only just met. Perhaps we could take some time to. He crossed the room with surprising speed for a drunk man and grabbed her arm. You're my wife. You'll do as I say. What happened next would haunt Elizabeth for months to come. The pain, the humiliation, the feeling of being nothing more than property to be used. When it was over, she lay awake beside her snoring husband, silent tears streaming down her face, wondering how she would survive this life. Morning brought no respite. Wilkes awoke with a hangover that only worsened his temperament. Make breakfast, he ordered. Then I need you to mend my clothes. Got work to do in the south field. Elizabeth moved through the morning in a daze, cooking, cleaning, and trying to avoid Wilkes's volatile moods. When he finally left to work the field, she collapsed at the table, her mind racing with desperate thoughts of escape. But where would she go? She had no money, no family, nothing but the clothes she'd brought with her. Boston was an impossible distance away, and even if she could reach it, there was nothing for her there anymore. A soft knock at the door startled her. She opened it cautiously to find Ethan Lawson standing there, hat in hand. Mrs. Wilkes, he said, his eyes taking in her disheveled appearance and the bruise forming on her wrist where Wilkes had grabbed her. "I was passing by and thought I'd see if you needed anything from town." "Mr. Lawson," she said, glancing nervously toward the field where Wilkes was working. "My husband wouldn't approve of visitors when he's not home." "I understand," Ethan said, making no move to leave. "Mrs. Miller said she visited you last night, told me the place was in a sorry state." "I've been cleaning," Elizabeth replied, unsure why she was even engaging in conversation when Wilkes could return at any moment. Ethan's gaze fell to her wrist again, and his jaw tightened. "Did he do that to you?" Elizabeth instinctively covered the bruise with her other hand. "It was an accident. Mrs. Wilkes, please call me Elizabeth," she said, surprising herself. "Elizabeth," he said, her name sounding different in his gentle voice. "I meant what I said yesterday. You don't have to go through with this life. There are good people in Carlin who would help you." "I made vows," she whispered, "before God and the law. Vows made under duress and false pretenses," Ethan argued quietly. "Wilkes lied to you about everything, didn't he? The ranch, his character, what kind of life you'd have here." Elizabeth couldn't deny it. "What would you have me do, Mr. Lawson? I have nowhere to go, no means to support myself." "There's work in town. Mrs. Miller needs help at the store. The school needs a teacher's assistant. You're educated, I can tell." "You can't know that," she said with the ghost of a smile. "The way you speak, the books I saw in your trunk yesterday." He returned her smile. "I notice things." The sound of Wilkes cursing in the distance made her stiffen with fear. "He's coming back," she whispered urgently. "Please go." Ethan nodded, placing his hat back on his head. "I'll go, but Elizabeth, remember what I said. And if you need help, any kind of help, get word to me. I'm staying at Triple Creek Ranch, about 5 miles east of here." He was gone before Wilkes came into view, but Elizabeth's heart was racing as if she'd been caught in something illicit. Just talking to another man felt dangerous with Alfred Wilkes as her husband. That evening, as she served Wilkes his dinner, he seemed more agitated than usual. "Saw someone riding away from here earlier," he said, watching her closely. "Got visitors I don't know about." "No, sir," she lied, keeping her eyes on her plate. "Must have been someone who took a wrong turn." "Better not be lying to me," he warned. "Man has a right to know who's coming around his property talking to his wife." Elizabeth nodded, saying nothing more as they ate in silence. After dinner, Wilkes pulled out his bottle again, drinking steadily as the evening wore on. Elizabeth cleaned the dishes and mended his work shirts, dreading the moment he would stumble to bed and expect her to join him. When it finally happened, it was as brutal as the night before. This time, though, something inside Elizabeth hardened. She would not live this way. She could not. Ethan Lawson's words echoed in her mind. "You don't have to go through with it." For the next week, Elizabeth endured Wilkes's cruelty while secretly planning her escape. She discovered that Wilkes kept money hidden in a rusted coffee tin behind a loose board in the bedroom wall. Each day, she took a small amount, wrapping the coins in a handkerchief and hiding them in her boot. Twice more, Ethan found reasons to ride past the cabin when Wilkes was working in the fields. Each time they spoke briefly, and each time Elizabeth found her resolve strengthening. "I can help you," Ethan told her during his third visit. "Just say the word." "Why would you risk helping me?" she asked. "You barely know me." "Because no one deserves what he's doing to you," Ethan replied, his eyes intense. "And because from the moment I saw you step off that stagecoach, I knew you were someone worth knowing." His words warmed something inside her that had grown cold and frightened. "Sunday," she whispered. "He goes into town every Sunday afternoon for cards and drinking. He won't return until late." Ethan nodded. "I'll be here." Sunday arrived with agonizing slowness. Elizabeth rose early, cooking Wilkes a large breakfast and playing the role of dutiful wife. After the morning meal, he announced his intention to head into town. "Don't wait up," he said, pulling on his coat, "and have a hot meal ready when I get back, no matter the hour." "Yes, husband," she replied meekly, not meeting his eyes. The moment his horse disappeared down the road, Elizabeth flew into action. She gathered her few possessions, the money she'd been hiding, and a small sack of food. Everything she truly cared about fit into a single carpet bag. By noon, she was ready, sitting nervously by the window, watching for any sign of Ethan or worse, Wilkes returning unexpectedly. When she finally spotted a rider approaching, she nearly cried with relief at the sight of Ethan's familiar figure. "Are you certain about this?" he asked when she met him at the door, carpetbag in hand. "More certain than I've ever been about anything," she replied. He helped her onto his horse, and they rode away from the cabin that had been her prison for 10 long days. Elizabeth didn't look back. "Where are we going?" she asked as they rode east away from town. "Triple Creek Ranch for now," Ethan replied. "My boss, Mr. Henderson, is a good man. His wife will welcome you. And when Wilkes comes looking for me, he will, you know, not because he cares for me, but because I belong to him in his mind." "Let me worry about Wilkes," Ethan said, his voice hardening. "You just focus on starting over." Triple Creek Ranch was everything Wilkes had falsely promised. His property would be a sprawling, well-maintained ranch with a beautiful main house, bunkhouse, and barn. Cattle grazed on green pastures, and everywhere Elizabeth looked, she saw signs of prosperity built on honest work. Margaret Henderson, the ranch owner's wife, welcomed Elizabeth with open arms after hearing a simplified version of her situation. "You'll stay in the guest room as long as you need," she insisted. "My husband and I don't hold with men who mistreat women, mail-order brides or otherwise." That night, in a clean, comfortable bed with a lock on the door, Elizabeth slept peacefully for the first time since arriving in Nevada. Her peace was short-lived. 2 days later, Alfred Wilkes rode onto Triple Creek property, drunk and enraged, demanding the return of his wife. Elizabeth watched from an upstairs window as James Henderson, Ethan, and 2 other ranch hands met Wilkes in the yard. "Your wife isn't here, Wilkes," Henderson lied smoothly. "And even if she were, I wouldn't turn her over to a man in your condition." "She's my legal wife," Wilkes shouted, swaying in his saddle. "I'll have the law on you for harboring her." "Go ahead," Henderson replied calmly. "Bring Sheriff Taylor out here. I'm sure he'd be interested to see those bruises on your wife's arms and hear how you've been treating her." Wilkes's face contorted with rage. "This ain't over," he snarled before turning his horse and galloping away. That evening, Ethan found Elizabeth sitting alone on the porch watching the sunset. "He'll be back," she said quietly as Ethan took a seat beside her. "Maybe with the sheriff." "Sheriff Taylor is a fair man," Ethan assured her, "and he knows Wilkes's reputation." "But you're right, this isn't over yet." Elizabeth turned to face him fully. "Why are you helping me, truly?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "My mother was a mail-order bride," he finally said. "Came out from Pennsylvania to marry a man she'd never met. She was lucky my father was a good man who grew to love her deeply, but I've seen other women who weren't so fortunate." He looked at her intently. "No one deserves what Wilkes was doing to you, and maybe—" he hesitated. "Maybe I saw something in your eyes that first day. Something that made me want to know you better." Elizabeth felt her cheeks warm. "I'm still a married woman, Mr. Lawson." "I know," he said quickly. "And I respect that, even if your marriage was built on lies. I'm not expecting anything from you, Elizabeth. I just want to help." She believed him, and that realization was both comforting and frightening. Comforting because she desperately needed someone to trust. frightening because she was beginning to care for this kind cowboy in a way that complicated her already precarious situation. The next morning, Sheriff Taylor arrived at Triple Creek Ranch. Elizabeth's heart sank when she saw Wilkes riding beside him, looking smugly triumphant. "Mrs. Wilkes," the sheriff said kindly when Elizabeth came downstairs. "Your husband has reported you missing and claims you've been taken against your will." "That's a lie," Elizabeth said firmly. "I left of my own accord after enduring days of mistreatment," Wilkes sneered. "She's my wife. She belongs at home with me." "Sheriff," Ethan stepped forward, "Mrs. Wilkes had bruises on her wrists and arms when she arrived here. Ask any of the women who helped tend to her." The sheriff looked troubled. "Mrs. Wilkes, is this true?" "It is," she confirmed. "Mr. Wilkes was not the man he presented himself to be in his letters. He is cruel when drinking, which is most of the time, and he—" She faltered, unable to speak of the most intimate violations. "She's making up stories," Wilkes interrupted. "Woman's place is with her husband. That's the law." "Actually," the sheriff said slowly, "the law also protects citizens from harm." He turned to Elizabeth. "Mrs. Wilkes, would you be willing to swear out a complaint against your husband for physical mistreatment?" "I would," she said without hesitation. Wilkes lunged forward, only to be restrained by Ethan and another ranch hand. "You ungrateful whore," he shouted. "After I paid good money to bring you out here." "That's enough," the sheriff snapped. "Wilkes, you're coming with me. We'll sort this out properly in town." He turned to Elizabeth. "Madam, I'll need you to come to my office tomorrow to make a formal statement." As the sheriff led Wilkes away, Elizabeth felt a wave of relief wash over her. It wasn't over, but for the first time, she felt she might truly escape her nightmare. The next day, Ethan accompanied Elizabeth to town to give her statement to the sheriff. The ride gave them time to talk, and Elizabeth found herself opening up about her life in Boston, her parents' deaths, the loss of their home, her desperate decision to become a mail-order bride. "I was so naive," she admitted. "I believed everything he wrote in those letters." "You were hopeful," Ethan corrected gently. "There's no shame in that." In town, they found Main Street abuzz with gossip about the Wilkes situation. Several women approached Elizabeth to offer support, including Sarah Miller. "I knew something wasn't right with that man," Sarah said, hugging Elizabeth. "I'm just glad you got away before worse happened." At the sheriff's office, Elizabeth provided a detailed account of her brief, traumatic marriage. Sheriff Taylor listened gravely, taking careful notes. "Mrs. Wilkes," he said when she had finished, "I've known Alfred Wilkes for years, and I can't say I'm surprised by your account. He spent more nights in my jail for drunkenness and fighting than I care to count." "What happens now?" she asked. "Well, legally, he's still your husband," the sheriff admitted, "but I can keep him in jail for a while on the assault charges. That will give you some time to consider your options." "Options? Divorce isn't easy to obtain, particularly for a woman," he explained, "but with evidence of cruelty it's possible. Judge Morris comes through town every 2 months. He'll be here next week. You could petition him then." Hope bloomed in Elizabeth's heart. "I'll do that," she said firmly. As they left the sheriff's office, Ethan suggested they stop for lunch at the hotel restaurant. "You've had a difficult morning," he said. "You should eat something." Over a simple meal of beef stew and fresh bread, they continued talking, finding common ground in their love of books and music. Elizabeth learned that Ethan had been educated in St. Louis before coming west to work as a ranch hand. "My father wanted me to become a lawyer," he explained, "but I couldn't imagine spending my life indoors. After he died, I headed west to find my own path." "Do you regret it?" she asked. He smiled. "Not for a moment, especially not today." The way he looked at her made Elizabeth's heart race, but she reminded herself of the complicated reality of her situation. She was still married, still vulnerable, still uncertain of her future. As if reading her thoughts, Ethan said, "I know this isn't the right time, Elizabeth. You need to sort out your situation with Wilkes first, but I want you to know that I'm here, whatever you need." "Thank you," she said softly. "Your friendship means more to me than I can express." The following days passed in a strange, peaceful rhythm. Elizabeth stayed at Triple Creek, helping Margaret Henderson with household tasks and slowly regaining her confidence. Ethan was a constant, reassuring presence, respectful of her boundaries but always nearby if she needed anything. Word came that Judge Morris would arrive in Carlin on Friday, and Elizabeth prepared her petition for divorce with the help of the town's only lawyer, a semi-retired man named Franklin Powell. "It won't be easy," Powell warned her. "Divorce is a serious matter, especially on grounds of cruelty. But with the sheriff's testimony and evidence of your injuries, I believe the judge will grant it." Thursday evening, the peaceful routine was shattered when a ranch hand rode in with troubling news. Alfred Wilkes had been released from jail and was telling everyone in town that he was going to reclaim his wife, by force if necessary. "He's drinking heavily at the Silver Dollar Saloon," the young man reported, "making all kinds of threats against Mr. Lawson and anyone harboring Mrs. Wilkes." James Henderson immediately ordered the ranch hands to take shifts standing guard through the night. "I won't have that drunk threatening anyone under my protection," he declared. Ethan found Elizabeth in the garden, where she had gone to process the news. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said gently. "I can't live in fear of him forever," she replied, though her voice trembled slightly. "Just until tomorrow," Ethan said, taking a seat beside her on the bench. "Once the judge hears your case, what if the judge doesn't grant the divorce?" she interrupted, voicing her deepest fear. "What if I'm legally bound to that man for the rest of my life?" Ethan took her hand. "Then we'll find another way. I promise you, Elizabeth, you will never have to go back to him." The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Ethan," she whispered, "why are you doing all this for me?" Instead of answering with words, he leaned forward slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she didn't, he pressed his lips to hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Elizabeth had never been kissed like this, with tenderness, with respect, with an unspoken question rather than a demand. When they parted, she found herself speechless, emotions swirling through her that she couldn't begin to sort out. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, misinterpreting her silence. "That was inappropriate. You're still married, and she stopped him by placing her fingers lightly against his lips. "Don't apologize," she said softly, "but you're right, I am still married, and until that changes we can't." "I understand," he assured her. "I'll wait, Elizabeth, however long it takes." They walked back to the house together, a new awareness between them that was both exhilarating and terrifying. That night, Elizabeth couldn't sleep, her mind cycling between anxiety about the upcoming hearing and the memory of Ethan's kiss. Around midnight, she heard the sound of horses approaching and voices raised in alarm. Looking out her window, she saw Alfred Wilkes and two rough-looking men riding onto the property. All three were visibly drunk, Wilkes brandishing a rifle. "Bring out my wife," he bellowed. "I know she's in there." Ranch hands emerged from the bunkhouse, Henderson and Ethan among them. "Wilkes, you're trespassing," Henderson called. "Leave now or I'll have my men remove you." Wilkes fired a shot into the air. "I'm not leaving without what's mine." Elizabeth's heart pounded in terror as she watched the confrontation unfold. She couldn't let anyone be hurt because of her. Making a split-second decision, she threw a shawl over her nightgown and hurried downstairs. Margaret Henderson tried to stop her. "Child, don't go out there." The men will handle this. I can't let anyone get hurt because of me, Elizabeth insisted, pulling away. She stepped onto the porch just as the situation was escalating, Wilkes pointing his rifle directly at Ethan. "There she is," one of Wilkes's companions shouted, spotting Elizabeth. Wilkes turned, his face contorted with drunken rage. "Get down here, woman. Time to go home where you belong. Put down the gun, Alfred," Elizabeth called, her voice steadier than she felt. "This isn't the way to resolve anything." "There's nothing to resolve," he slurred. "You're my wife. I own you." "No man owns another person," she replied. "Not in this country, not anymore." Her words seemed to enrage him further. He swung the rifle toward her. "If I can't have you, no one will." Several things happened at once. Ethan lunged for Wilkes. Henderson shouted a warning. The rifle discharged with a deafening crack. Elizabeth felt something whiz past her head as she was tackled from the side by Margaret Henderson, both women falling to the porch floor. When she looked up, Wilkes was on the ground, Ethan and two other ranch hands restraining him while his companions fled into the night. Sheriff Taylor arrived 20 minutes later, alerted by a ranch hand who had ridden for help at the first sign of trouble. This time, he didn't just arrest Wilkes for drunkenness or assault, he charged him with attempted murder. "He won't be getting out any time soon," the sheriff assured Elizabeth. "And when Judge Morris hears about this, I've no doubt about the outcome of your petition." The next morning, despite the previous night's ordeal, Elizabeth insisted on going to town for her hearing. Ethan and the Hendersons accompanied her, providing both moral support and testimony about Wilkes's violent behavior. Judge Morris, a stern man with penetrating eyes and a reputation for fairness, listened carefully to Elizabeth's account of her brief marriage, the sheriff's testimony about Wilkes's pattern of drunkenness and violence, and finally, the eyewitness accounts of the previous night's events. "Mrs. Wilkes," the judge said when all testimony had been given, "I've heard enough to satisfy me that this marriage was entered into under false pretenses and has been characterized by cruelty that no person should endure. I hereby grant your petition for divorce on grounds of extreme cruelty." He paused, looking at her kindly. "The divorce will be final in 30 days. In the meantime, I'm issuing a restraining order preventing Alfred Wilkes from coming within 100 yards of you, assuming he's released from jail, which seems unlikely given the charges he's facing." Elizabeth could hardly believe it was over. She was free, or would be, in 30 days. The relief was so overwhelming that she began to weep quietly as she left the courthouse, Ethan's steadying hand at her elbow. "It's done," he said softly. "He can't hurt you anymore." Back at Triple Creek, the Hendersons insisted on celebrating the judge's decision with a special dinner. As they ate and talked, Elizabeth felt something she hadn't experienced in a very long time: hope for the future. After dinner, she and Ethan walked out to the porch, the night air cool and refreshing after the warmth of the house. "What will you do now?" he asked. "Will you return to Boston?" Elizabeth shook her head. "There's nothing for me there anymore. And despite everything that's happened, I've grown fond of Nevada. The openness of it, the feeling that anything is possible." "You could stay here," Ethan suggested cautiously. "The Hendersons have already said you're welcome as long as you like, and Mrs. Miller mentioned again today that she needs help at the store." "I'd like that," Elizabeth admitted. "A fresh start in Carlin." Ethan hesitated, then took both her hands in his. "Elizabeth, I know it's too soon. You need time to heal, to find your footing. But I want you to know that my feelings for you are genuine. When the time is right, when you're truly free and ready, I hope you'll give me a chance to court you properly." Elizabeth felt a warmth bloom in her chest. "I'd like that too," she whispered. "Very much." The 30 days passed quickly as Elizabeth settled into life in Carlin. She took the job at Sarah Miller's general store, rented a small room above the milliner's shop, and slowly built a new life for herself. Everyone in town knew her story, and while some disapproved of a woman divorcing her husband, most were supportive, especially after hearing about Wilkes's violent behavior. Alfred Wilkes was sentenced to 5 years in the Nevada State Prison for the attempted murder charge, removing any immediate threat to Elizabeth's safety. Still, the memory of those 10 terrible days in his cabin lingered, sometimes waking her in the night with phantom pains and fears. True to his word, Ethan waited patiently, visiting her in town when his work at Triple Creek allowed, bringing her books he thought she might enjoy, taking her on gentle Sunday afternoon rides to show her the beauty of the Nevada landscape. Their friendship deepened, and Elizabeth found herself thinking of him more and more, looking forward to his visits with an anticipation that made her heart race. When the 30 days ended and her divorce was final, Ethan came to the store with a small bouquet of wildflowers. "These are for you," he said, a touch of nervousness in his voice that Elizabeth found endearing. "To celebrate your freedom." "Thank you," she replied, taking the flowers and inhaling their sweet scent. "They're beautiful." "Elizabeth," he said hesitantly, "now that you're officially divorced, I was wondering if you would allow me to court you properly. With your permission, of course." She smiled, touched by his formality. "I would be honored, Ethan, but you should know that I'm not the same woman who stepped off that stage coach 3 months ago. What happened with Wilkes, it's changed me." "I know," he said gently, "but the woman you are now, strong, resilient, determined, she's even more remarkable than the one I first met." His words brought tears to her eyes. "You truly believe that?" "With all my heart." Their courtship progressed slowly, respectfully, with Ethan always mindful of Elizabeth's past trauma. He never pushed, never presumed, allowing her to set the pace of their relationship. They attended church together on Sundays, had picnics by the creek when weather permitted, and spent countless hours in conversation, discovering the deep compatibility of their minds and spirits. 5 months after her divorce was finalized, Ethan took Elizabeth to a beautiful spot overlooking the valley, the spring wildflowers just beginning to bloom across the landscape. "I've been saving for years," he told her as they sat side by side on a blanket. "Working hard, putting away every extra penny. Last month I made the final payment on a piece of land about 10 miles south of here, 160 acres with good water and pasture." "Your own ranch," Elizabeth said, delighted for him. "Ethan, that's wonderful." "It could be," he agreed, suddenly serious. "But a ranch isn't just land and cattle, it's a home, a family." He took her hands in his. "Elizabeth, I love you. I think I've loved you since that first day when you were brave enough to look me in the eye despite everything you were facing. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Of building that home, that family with me?" Elizabeth's heart soared at his words. Over the months of their courtship, she had come to love this man deeply, his kindness, his integrity, his patient strength. The fact that he saw her as brave rather than broken meant everything to her. "Yes," she whispered, tears of joy spilling down her cheeks. "Yes, Ethan, I will marry you." They were married on a perfect June morning in 1876, 8 months after Elizabeth had first arrived in Carlin. The small church was filled with friends they had made, the Hendersons, Sarah Miller, Sheriff Taylor, and many others who had helped Elizabeth through the darkest period of her life. As they exchanged vows, Elizabeth reflected on how different this ceremony felt from her first marriage. There was no fear, no desperation, only love and hope for the future they would build together. Their new home was modest but solid, a 2-room cabin that Ethan had built with help from friends, with space to expand as their family grew. The land around it was promising, with good grass for cattle and a clear stream running through the property. "Welcome home, Mrs. Lawson," Ethan said, carrying her over the threshold as tradition dictated. "It's perfect," she replied, looking around at the simple furnishings and homey touches she had contributed. "Our own little piece of Nevada." That night, as they lay together in their new bed, Elizabeth finally felt the last shadows of her past recede. In Ethan's gentle embrace, she found healing for wounds both seen and unseen, his patience and love washing away the memory of violation and fear. "I never thought I could be this happy," she confessed, nestled against his chest. "When I came west, I was just hoping for security, perhaps companionship. I never dreamed of finding true love. Sometimes the best things in life are the ones we never thought to look for," Ethan replied, kissing her softly. "I wasn't looking for a wife when I helped a frightened woman with her trunk that day, but I found my heart instead." In the years that followed, the Lawson Ranch prospered through hard work and determination. Ethan proved to be as skilled a rancher as he was a husband, gradually increasing their herd and adding to their property when adjacent land became available. Elizabeth found her place not just as Ethan's wife, but as a respected member of the Carlin community. She continued working at the general store part-time, started a small lending library out of their home, and became known for her willingness to help neighbors in times of need. Their family grew with the birth of their first child, a son they named James, after James Henderson, who had protected Elizabeth in her time of need. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Margaret, named for Mrs. Henderson. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching 6-year-old James and 4-year-old Margaret playing in the yard, Elizabeth reached for Ethan's hand. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" she asked. "When you saw how afraid I was of Alfred Wilkes." Ethan smiled. "I told you that you didn't have to go through with it. Those words changed my life," she said softly. "They gave me permission to believe I deserved better." "You deserved everything good in this world," Ethan replied, squeezing her hand. "I'm just grateful I get to be part of it." "We've built something beautiful here," Elizabeth said, looking out at their thriving ranch, their healthy children, the life they had created together. "Something I never dared to dream of when I stepped off that stagecoach." "And we're just getting started," Ethan promised, pulling her close for a kiss that still held all the tenderness and passion of their early days together. As the sun set over their land, painting the Nevada sky in brilliant golds and purples, Elizabeth Lawson said a silent prayer of gratitude for the cruel twist of fate that had brought her west to meet a mail-order groom who was cruel and drunk, and for the brave cowboy who had given her the courage to choose a different path. Their love story hadn't begun with love at all, but with an act of kindness and courage that blossomed into something neither of them had expected to find in the wild, unforgiving beauty of the Nevada frontier. It was a love forged in adversity, tempered by patience, and made stronger by the obstacles they had overcome together. And as stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Elizabeth knew with absolute certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be, not as property or a possession, but as a beloved partner in a life built on mutual respect, shared dreams, and enduring love.